Sing me a song of a lass that is gone.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylee and every single Tuesday I bring out a different Outlander related video to help us get through Droughtlander. Now this season, or this series of videos I've been doing, I have been recapping the season 1 episodes and we're currently up to episode 8, both sides now. Now, this was one of the episodes that absolutely pulled at my heartstrings. There were so many moments throughout this episode that I wanted to cry, or I wanted to just, my heart just broke for different characters. And it was just one of those episodes that I fell in love with. And it's probably not one of the most highly ranked episodes throughout season 1, but for me, it most certainly pulled the heartstrings a lot. Now, right from the start, we see that Frank is continuing his search for Claire and he is most certainly getting desperate. The police officers at the local station that he's currently at are basically at their wits' end with how much Frank is showing up and, you know, trying to dig into Claire's case. It really does show how much Claire meant to Frank. And this was one of those moments that I was like, oh, poor Frank. Like, my heart breaks for Frank throughout this entire episode.
Please, believe me when I say I wish there was more that we could do.
That's your job. Perhaps you could do that.
Hugh Munro is also introduced in this episode. Now, Hugh Munro is the man who has had his tongue cut out when he was a prisoner of war, basically. And Hugh is just fantastic. I absolutely love him. He brings very vital information to Jamie in regards to the bounty that's on his head. But it's also here that we see him giving Claire the wedding gift, the actual dragonfly in amber. Now, I absolutely loved this. I love that the physical dragonfly in amber is introduced and it just sets the tone for future things. Or not, doesn't set the tone, but I love how they incorporate titles into physical items or things that are said throughout series, books or TVs, you know, any sort of series. I love when they introduce the naming into it, if that makes sense.
This is beautiful. It's a dragonfly.
Now, if you're not a book reader and you are only a TV show fan, this was the episode that we got to see young Roger Wakefield. Now, as a TV-only fan, you probably didn't know the significance of Roger coming into it for future sort of storylines. But for book readers who were like, oh, that's young Roger, keep your eye on him. It was so good to have him introduced at such a young age in the TV series.
May I have a biscuit, please?
You mean another biscuit? Aye.
You've been eating all my biscuits, Roger Wakefield.
So as I said earlier, this is the episode that really does pull at the Frank heartstrings for those people that have, you know, that love for Frank. Now, throughout this episode, it's very clear that Frank is very much still looking for Claire and trying to find her and knows that she wouldn't just disappear, to say. But, you know, he's obviously putting up rewards and notes on the walls and things like that, you know, searching for answers for where she could be. Obviously, these people that are introduced in the next clip take full advantage of the fact that Frank is getting desperate in his search and they lure him into an alley to try and get the reward money. But this is where Frank really does show, if needed, he could be very, very brutal. And you do definitely get a glimpse of maybe a past ancestor when he goes on the attack.
There is no Outlander, is there? Is there?
Jumping back into the past, we then see that Claire is also getting lessons on how to defend herself if something was to happen. Now, I love the scene that she has with Angus where he's trying to show her where to stab if she needs to protect herself or do damage to somebody else. This obviously, when you're watching the episode, I clicked on it straight away that this is really going to lead into something more. Like, this is not a good sign. I love that they turned it into a bit more of a joking scenario and, you know, you could see Claire having a bit of a laugh and a push around with young Willie, but in the background, my mind was going, this is not good.
Upward and into the kidney. Straight up. Drop like a stone.
Now, this was obviously confirmed that, you know, bad things are going to happen when two deserter redcoats actually attack Jamie and Claire whilst they're having sex. And one redcoat in particular attempts to rape or sexually assault Claire, leading in his death via Claire. Now, obviously, Claire goes into shock, and it's just the way they portrayed this scene, I think, was really well done, the way they portrayed it. But poor Claire, poor Claire in any aspect, but just the fact that then she goes into shock and it sort of reiterates that the knife, you know what I mean? Like, you see the connections of, oh, okay, she learned how to defend herself because the poor girl has now had to defend herself. Mrs. Graham also comes into play with this episode when she is basically having an argument with the Reverend, saying she must tell Frank what she believes has happened to Claire. Frank overhears this conversation and, you know, says, well, Mrs. Graham, you need to tell me now. She goes through her theory and basically what has happened to Claire, where she's gone through the stones. And, well, I mean, she doesn't exactly say where and when and whatever, but, you know, that theory of she's gone through the stones, it's happened before, it's, you know, it's basically what's happened. And Frank, at the start, I don't believe he believes her, but then we see him head to the stones on his way home. Of course, by this point, Claire is also at the stones in a very wonderful twist of fate. But this is again one of those parts of this episode that really, it cracked me. It absolutely cracked me. Having Frank on one side and Claire on the other, and having that wish, sort of the yelling of each other and yelling towards each other, you know, knowing that they could possibly hear each other on each side, it really broke my heart, especially when Frank, being such a, you know, I want to say strong believer against the stones and that theory, but the fact that he was like, it proved how desperate he was to get Claire back. He was willing to believe anything, and if she could come through those stones by him being there and calling out to her, he was going to try it. Claire obviously makes a dash for the stones and is recaptured by the redcoats, and it's just heartbreaking. This scene is heartbreaking.
Claire!
Of course, after being captured by the redcoats, man, poor Claire, just taken back to good old Blackjack, and man, what a brute. It's so hard to have an episode like this where you have Frank on one hand, who, I mean, I know people don't love Frank, and I understand why, and everything that happens in the future episodes and books and whatever, but at this point in time when you're watching these episodes, Frank is an innocent bystander. The poor man has lost his wife, he's tragically looking for her, he's going down every route to find, and then we have Blackjack, who is the same. Tobias Menzies is just magnificent throughout this entire series. And it's like, as a viewer, you're having this very sad moment for Frank, and then you see Tobias Menzies as Blackjack, and you're just like, you animal of a man, get off the screen, you're horrible, we don't like you. We then have a Jamie coming through the window though with his "I'll thank you to take your hands off my wife" line, and I think everybody's hearts just melt for Jamie at that point. It's one of the most iconic sentencing lines throughout this season, throughout this episode in particular, but throughout this season, and it really just, it brings in, there is a battle in the next episode.
I'll thank you to take your hands off my wife.
I would love to know what you thought about this episode. Was it one of your favorites? Was it one of those ones you were just sort of like, whatever? To me, again, I can't alliterate enough how much this episode pulled at my heartstrings. It was really that episode that I thought, poor Frank. And I mean, I obviously poor Claire for being attacked, not once, not twice, but like 3 times. and, you know, she was almost sexually assaulted, she's killed someone, she's just, you know, obviously it's just horrendous for her. But my heart really was with Frank throughout this episode. And I just thought, if that was me and my husband, for example, disappeared like that, and I knew he wouldn't just run off with someone, and I knew he wouldn't just, you know, disappear. Oh, poor Frank. It would be just, I have no words on how I felt bad for Frank. Again, I say I know later on. So let's, if we're going to talk about Frank, let's just concentrate on what we would have known up to this point from books and TV series. I don't want to hear any bagging of Frank yet. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please remember to hit that like button and comment down below. And if you're not already a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help the channel grow. I do bring out new Outlander content every single Tuesday, and we're about to bring out an abundance of Go Tell the Bees That I Am Gone content, so get ready for that. I hope you all have a great week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!
Sing me a song of a lass that is gone.